Just lie whenever you want.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll do it now. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Red morning. I feel like crap, so I'm going full anon with the boys here. Carl, I see you're off the purge now, which is awesome.
Oh, no, I'm still on the purge. It was just I purged my computer. Bought a new one, so all the materials are on the old one. So I just grabbed the first pick of Schopenhauer I could find.
Dude, with your security, I picture you with one of those emergency destruction toolkits where you have like a 7-inch screwdriver, a Pulaski, and and a degausser.
Well, you're not far off.
I miss that,
Carl. Carl, do you even Faraday cage? What the hell?
Oh, I do have a BIOS lock on all my shit, so you can start it. But then there's the matter of encrypting the hard drives. But everyone should do that, really.
I'm taking it you avoid the AMD chips too, then?
I use this is Intel, but I've used AMD for years. It depends on what you're using the computer for. It's the same thing with. I had the same thing with some NICs. I was replacing that. There was a couple of NICs made a few years ago they were made with a chipset that let you put the NIC in promiscuous mode.
Right.
And for those who don't know what that is, it means that instead of just directing traffic, you're using your network card to sniff all the network traffic.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. It's like a bunch of people yelling at each other. You yell the guy's name, and then he starts paying attention. But then there's that asshole in the corner who just listens to everything.
Yeah, same thing principally. So it's kind of funny though what you can pull off the internet. I mean, when you start pulling people's nudes and shit.
The best is doing that on ship because we had to run off a satellite network connection, basically like 56K modem, but for a crew of 200. And I remember one guy was getting nudes from his wife, and it was jamming up our whole system because it was killing all the bandwidth that we needed for operational duties.
Oh, Jesus.
So we ran through our little investigation up there. We found it was some dude's wife with a bottle and some insertion stuff. And it was funny because we were joking. It's like, boss, can I go down there and tell him to get his fat bitch wife off of our servers? They told me not to do that one, and he would bring it through the chain of command. But that was funny. So yeah, be careful. You're IT guys. If you screw something up by sending nudes, sometimes they have to go look into what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one thing with IT guys. You don't want to fuck them over because you'd be amazed what they can actually pull off a corporate line.
Mm-hmm. I guess this is sort of tangential to the topic. It was like you actually put me onto this one. It was a great idea because I'm completely incompetent in financial future planning. I think that's how. Did I get the topic right, or it was something about Corey? How did you put it? You put it better.
I don't remember. God damn it.
Yeah, it was something to the effect of planning for your future financially. Family is optional or something like that. I was really catchy anyway.
Yeah. I mean, the stay plan is the go plan, and you still have to take care of the basic stuff, even in times of plenty, like right now. Everybody thinks this particular run we're on is going to last forever, and it's probably not. So, there should be a few things that you're doing, at least financially and, for other planning, other than finances, that every guy should be doing just for himself to make sure that he's on top of things. Mm-hmm. So, it's always about taking care of yourself first and, putting on your own oxygen mask and helping out those around you when you can. But there are some very basic things that you can do, financially, personally, and professionally to try and ensure that you're still bringing in the resources, regardless of whether or not the world is burning down around you. So,
all right, I'm assuming we're talking more sophisticated than canned foods and shotguns, right?
Well, I mean, prepping is one method of trying to deal with the decline of Western civilization. But again, at this point in time, I would say that prepping is more of a business than it is a planning strategy. But,
oh God, yeah.
Between the guys saying, well, get this water desalinator when you live in the middle of a landlocked country, that sometimes people really aren't thinking when it comes to what it is that they really need for, their survival.
I figure that's like LARPing as anything. I'm totally prepped. I got all these things that I'm told I have to fill this Walking Dead fantasy I've got. Who cares if it actually works or not? As long as I feel the part.
Hey, man, everybody needs a bunker. We found that out in the 1950s, here in the U.S., where there was a good percentage of the population that were prepping for a war that thankfully never happened. And they had these, sealed concrete bunkers underground with 5 years worth of dried beans and, canned water at the time, because they didn't do bottled water, which is kind of gross. But, just all these different things to try and prepare for the future, a future apocalypse of some kind.
I guess it just shows how little we knew about radiation, because that 6-inch concrete wall may stop the alpha particles, but the rest of it's going to come in there and irradiate your body.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's assuming they even had air filtration that would work, which I doubt.
Right. Yeah. The particulate air filters probably weren't that effective. Charcoal is not going to stop uranium from getting through, or plutonium.
Well, to be honest with you, that's how I feel about most of the prepping. Because, some of it's sensible. I think everyone should have at least a week's worth of food at their house and access to water. But on the other hand, though, you are going to run out of ammunition sooner or later. I mean, if you have 10,000 bullets, how long are those going to last? Then you have medicines you're going to start running out of fairly quickly. And if you're dependent on medication, if you're on insulin, there's no point in you prepping. You're going to be dead. And the good thing about that is that when we eat your corpse, it will taste oh so sweet because of all that leftover sugar.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
Prepping everywhere but what it counts. Maybe I should stop eating all this crap and lose some weight.
Well, there are things you can keep in mind. Okay, if you're dependent on glasses, if you want to prep, get LASIK.
That would make sense.
It's a pain in the ass to get contact lenses in the apocalypse. Don't ask me how I know.
All right, I guess we should go to
just coping. It's coping. It's people trying to have control in a situation where they absolutely have no control.
Ooh, that kind of got to that whole order of men kind of.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, I mean, between that, and some of the other guys in leather jackets with sunglasses telling me how to live, it gets tedious. It really does. Whether you're a order of magnitude man better, or an alpha strategies, or a huntsman, or whatever the fuck you call yourself.
Dude, he hates me.
Who, Huntsman?
Yeah, specifically.
Oh, yeah.
Well, remember when he wrote that goofy article about, I don't know, something like anti-red pill or whatever, but it was just such a pedantic mess of gobbledygook. I wrote a response that was equally a mess.
Yeah.
Wymore Please just dunked all over me. He's like, what is this garbage you wrote? And I'm like, yeah, well, check the URL. And it's like, Huntsman is a retard, and it was written at the top. The joke fell flat, but after that, he's like, I'm done with you. And that's when he went to Ion Con, the Cake and Crisis Con thing they had.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was hilarious. Everybody was saying, that the conference was doomed from the start for inviting women, and less than 11 minutes into them collaborating, one of the women screams, Twitter rape or some shit. And one of the guys is immediately offended, and he can't participate now because they're siding with her, and holy crap. So
yeah.
Said, who are the women in this group?
Dude, I got a lot of grief too. There's guys that like me and they like their content too, and they're like, you're being way too hard on these guys, and you're just all kinds of grief. And then as soon as that happened, I just got a bunch of, okay, you win. I'm like, oh, that's not really what I wanted, but thank you.
Well, the thing is I got a really nice, double set of euchre cards from the guy who the guy who was having problems with Cake and a Crisis, so I feel kind of bad because he's a decent artist and a kind of a weird fiction writer, but other than that, I don't know what anybody's qualifications are for any of that stuff. I don't follow any of those guys. They seem to be very just, man up smart type of bullshit.
Who the fuck are these people?
I only know Huntsman because of that one hit piece, and the other guy because of Corey actually put me onto his work, and I kind of like artistic people. So,
yeah, Roman McClay, I think, or something. He calls, but he's hanging out with Goldman right now. They're like in the mountains hanging out right now. I'm not sure what that's all about, but yeah, we've got some weird dudes out there.
Probably psychedelics, though. I mean, Goldman seems to be really hard in on his altered states of consciousness.
Yeah, he is, but at the same time, he's also against people running from their problems. So, I mean, it's kind of a weird combination of the two.
Good old compartmentalization. You've solved it again.
I know. He's constantly on the run from whatever it is in his life that he doesn't like, but somehow he's a shaman of something. But whatever.
Why would you run from your problems when you can drown them in alcohol?
Yeah, see.
Now there's how you cope.
See, he'd rather have them turn into animals or something and attack him, I guess. I don't know. People have different ways of dealing with, all of their deep-rooted problems. And he seems to like ayahuasca and mushrooms better than, a gin and tonic.
Don't get me wrong. I'm all for running from problems. Like, once the military stopped working for me, I just left. But that's the thing. It's not like didn't leave to the mountains and avoid it. I'm just like, yeah, I'm done with you. Give me my paycheck. I'm out.
Yeah, I have that same strategy. I have this. People who know me tend to refer to it as the Carl Blacklist. And it's not that I hate people, but I'm a relatively patient dude. But when someone has finally succeeded in pissing me off, they're just eliminated completely from my life.
Yeah.
Speaking of your life, Sam Whiskey with the super chat here. He's curious.
Oh yeah, the vodka wasn't bad. I mean, the Russians really know vodka well. I mean, the prison tattoos were kind of painful, though. I've never been tattooed with, a burned boot heel used as ink.
But they somehow managed to get the entire cathedral onto your chest. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I even got, my dick tattooed.
Yeah. That's the second Prince story I didn't want to hear today. All right. Well, I guess we're goofing around enough.
Well, there was one thing I wanted to comment, though, on preppers before we actually get serious.
Please.
And it's kind of a digression that will lead into the topic of this show, but there are two kinds of preppers. There are the ones who are trying to maintain the life they have now as well as they can when the apocalypse finally comes and takes us all out of this miserable existence. And then you have the people who are just looking to survive. And if you want to survive, don't prep. Learn to live like a hunter and gatherer. They're the most anti-fragile community in the world. Like, if you cut the internet, there would be blood in the streets. The hunter-gatherers, I mean, they live the exact same way now that they did 10,000 or 100,000 years ago. We've just kind of created a very fragile society that depends on people like nuclear engineers maintaining the plants so they don't blow up. We have electricity that we depend on now for just about everything.
And Karen, who married them, hoping that she keeps them happy enough not to flick the switch.
Yeah, pretty much. You just hope that it's not Homer Simpson manning the nuclear power station down the street,
Oh, he probably could at this point. We've made everything so safe. That's how come these guys can talk about gobbledygook and nonsense that we haven't fallen off a cliff. Kudos to engineers.
Yeah, I actually look forward to more automation just because I can trust, at least I know if software that runs a nuclear plant has, some bugs in it. It's very hard to know that the human over there is bugged, and you can't alter human source code.
At least not too much, not yet.
At least you can bug fix software.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if the condition of half of the Tesla superchargers is any indication of how, adding more automation to everything is going to turn out, I'm not too optimistic.
Well, do you guys have those self checkouts now where it's completely automated so you can check your own groceries, bag them, and then pay and go?
Yeah, we got that.
Sure.
Yeah, I've actually figured something out. And if there's a queue at the tills, it's better to actually go to the man one. That would be a lot faster. Just because, who do you think is faster? The 18-year-old student who's there working, who is on her phone 24/7, or do you think grandma over there trying to pay with coins, shoving them into the card terminal?
Oh, yeah, I always check on the lineups, but that's the beauty of it too. Since there's 6 different self-serves, so the lineup can be 6 times as long or 5 times as long, and it's still faster to use that, I find. But if it's long enough that people still use it because they think it's convenient, and I see grandma at the till or whoever at the till, I usually head down to that one. People are very stupid; they just kind of follow herds. They don't really think it through, which I guess is kind of the topic of this. Although Corey, you got to lead because we were talking before the thing started, and I found out when it comes to the structured financial planning and that, I'm absolutely horrible. I've made every mistake you can make, and you sound much smarter at it than me. So I'm not leading this one.
Well, I mean, where do you want to start? I mean, most people have problems with, point number one when it comes to finances, and that's savings. We live in a very consumer-dominated culture, and no, I am not speaking in terms of philosophy. I am speaking in fact that we like to buy a lot of things. I'm not going off into a weird, we're all gonna be cogs in a wheel and Wittgenstein and Ebola and all that stuff with consumer culture. I mean that for the most part, when people get money in their pocket, it's always burning a hole in it, and they need to spend it on something because that's just what they've been told to do by their parents, the media, everyone around them. Status is based on a lot of what you have and not necessarily what you save. And what I tell a lot of people is that millionaires are millionaires in many cases because they still have the first nickel that they ever earned. It's that they're savers first and they're spenders second.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the problem that most people have. So the first thing that I would tell anyone is to automate some of your savings, whether it's into a government-funded plan, whether it's a pension that's guaranteed, whether it's a guaranteed savings account of some sort, or if you're not risk averse, stock market. I also recommend buying a little bit of commodities, and also I have a small position in crypto as well. So I mean, those are all things that I think people should do first before they start buying things and flexing. Is that they need to save first and foremost, and that's the position that they should take with any of their money is pay yourself first, and then give your money to others, whether it be family members or buying things or taking care of necessities.
Yeah, one thing I would add to that too, and because I was telling you about my story, when you're doing investing for the first time, look into, because I've noticed when it comes to investing, at least in the Canadian banks, they're treating it the same way that preppers treat buying shotguns and filtered water. They're almost trying to sell you on the idea of being fiscally responsible. Like, for example, if you get a mutual fund down here, there's always a fee on it. I think it's called an MEP, and that's the percentage that they take just for managing your fund.
Yep.
And you'll notice the ones that the banks always try to push on you have this horribly high MEP. So it turns out you end up paying, like, sure, these things make 10% versus the standard index fund, which makes 6. But if they're taking 5 points of that off as their fee, then you're really coming out behind. And it's really sneaky how they get you on that one too, because it's always in the small text. You have to read right through it. They only give you those options. And so I find a lot for investing, a little bit. I've gotten back into it now because I've lost a lot of money before. Well, not lost, but I haven't gained anything. I just say, screw it. Screw playing into my greed with that whole, we can get you 10 and 12%, which is just a pipe dream. That's like 2006 fantasy. Don't mind with the smaller percentages, but if there's no fees attached to it, at least you remove that incentive for the salesman to sell you more of it. If nobody's making any money off of it, then if anybody's selling it to you, it's got to be just for the value of the plan.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that mostly low load or no load, meaning low or no fees or close to no fee, mutual funds are the best for most people to invest in. Their performance is tied directly to specific market indicators, and they try to replicate those moves as closely as possible. And a lot of times now it's done by computer. So there are like companies out there now. I'm trying to think of the one that I use currently that's very good. It's literally computer based, and Betterment is the one that I use right now. And you pay a fee annually for the management, but it's done automatically, and it's on an algorithm to try and replicate the S&P 500 as closely as possible, and it's within a 0.5% year over year. I've been using it now for close to 5 years, and I automatically invest into it, and it does the betting, as I like to call it, but it's technically investing the same way as someone who's managing an index fund, but with literally none of the index fund fees and costs. So you're not paying a percentage to have your fund managed while you're losing money either. So I see no downside to it. And
well, that's not bad at all.
yeah, and I mean, here in the U.S., you can set up your own IRAs. You don't need to be part of a company in order to be in a savings plan, and there's no cost to you to do it. So, find one of these companies that do it automatically and with next to no fees, and you can see your money grow over time.
Hey, Carl, that's that automation you were talking about working for us.
Well, I think it's a clever thing to use a system like that, and it starts with you have to have the additional resources you need, and then you have to start making money off your money. And I think that's where most people fail, because they buy things that are going to decline in value no matter what, instead of getting to the point where you don't really worry about money. Then again, my philosophy has always been, I can always make more money. It's a lot easier to make more money than it is to spend less money.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like the whole spendthrift philosophy of financial independence, where you have to calculate, okay, how many grams of coffee do I put in this cup to make it as cheap as possible?
Oh, dear God.
Most people fuck up their financial life with big decisions: buying cars, buying houses, marrying people. Well, it depends on how you view buying. Buying hookers is fine. Wifing someone up is different.
That's the one.
well, you pay one to stay and you pay the other to leave. So, I mean, it's a completely different dynamic.
Well, hookers are it's like a leasing program. And a wife, then you buy it, and the second you take it off the lot, it drops 30% in value.
That's right.
Oh, so rent to own.
You have that depreciation problem, exactly.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I like Sam's take on the prepper, by the way, down here. Being on the mountain with a butter knife doesn't make you Rambo. My God, if that isn't a deep statement.
Yeah. I mean, once you've been up to 14,000 feet, it's an accomplishment. You need to tweet that out.
14,000 feet? That's not that far up, to be honest with you.
I know you can do that day hike for a lot of guys. I understand that.
Yeah, I was just because 14,000 feet, that's about half the height of Everest. I think Everest is 28,000.
Dude, being able to count your calories day after day is an accomplishment nowadays. It's not that I always joke with that you ain't shit and that's okay statement, but that's kind of where I'm going with this. Most guys are such trash that just basic preparation and adulting puts you above in that top 20%.
Yeah, I mean, but a lot of this adulting can actually be automated now, which is,
even better.
A good thing. It's even better. That's right. And
to be honest, just people using the term adulting makes me want to stab someone with a screwdriver.
Yes. Yeah. No. Absolutely. The fact that there are people of a certain age who need to describe the fact that they need to behave responsibly with a verb.
Ouch.
is pretty bad.
Point taken.
Yeah. So it's like, so what should you be doing, kind of instinctively at this point? Well, I have to describe it because I'm not doing that. I'm doing something completely different. In fact, the opposite. Whatever childing or whatever it might be called.
Yeah. Well, to add on to your thing earlier too, when you were talking about how to invest properly, I find people ignore subsidizing efforts so much, which is just ridiculous. Like just simple things. We were talking before about my wife's investment matching.
Yeah, when you get your first cubicle job, a lot of places, if they're of any size at all, will offer you a matching 401k option. We will give you up to 3% of whatever you put in. And if you say, okay, well, you're donating 3% to me so long as I donate 3% of my salary. I mean, that's literally free money.
Yeah.
And the fact that people generally don't take advantage of that is insane.
Oh, dude, even the military. So we have it's called an ILP. There's a bunch of different ways to get education in the military. One is it's an officer training program, which essentially somebody says, yeah, this guy would make a good officer. They pay for your schooling, you get paid to study, and then you go in the officer corps. That's what everybody wants because it's essentially a 4-year break from work. Then there's this one called ILP. You have to pay up front, but as long as you pass your courses, you get it fully subsidized. Nobody takes that. Everybody signs up to it. Even the girl who ran the thing told me this because I grabbed a degree from it. She goes, yeah, most people just do this and take one course a semester so they can pad their evaluation review for their promotions. Like you actually took it and used it. I'm like, well, yeah, it's like $20,000 every year here on education. Of course I'm going to take it. And then on top of that, so just for getting a 4-year degree, you make that money. You sell all your books secondhand. You can make that one there too. I know it's not a small amount, but it's not huge either. And then after that's all done, there's tons of government tax rebates for people who are taking education. So when it's all said and done, the military was essentially paying me to go to school, and all I had to do was pass, and nobody used it. And I can imagine we could probably fill an entire 4 episodes just out of the ways people are avoiding free money being thrown at them to do some menial task. And say what you will about investing, but I suck at investing the way you guys are talking about it, but investing in me has always paid huge dividends for me, and I am surprised more people don't do it.
Well, that's the other half of it is, you can reduce your costs and keep your wealth if you especially keep your health. I believe the statistic is that people lose upwards of 2/3 of their wealth in the last 6 months of their life in the U.S. And the reason for that is that their medical costs and their costs for nursing homes and 24-hour care essentially takes all of their remaining savings and eats it up.
Jesus, boomers.
Yeah. And the problem is that a lot of boomers now too aren't prepared for that. And what's going to end up happening is that the rest of us are going to end up subsidizing that. And when that happens, the problem then becomes, how does the system get repaid? Well, the system gets repaid by taking all of the assets of that boomer and literally taking them once they've died. So if you ever wanted to hand a legacy, even a small one, off to, your relatives, if you haven't planned properly financially, your house will get liquidated, and so will all of your larger assets after exemptions to pay Medicare back for housing you in a hospice for 3 weeks.
Dude, that's the one thing I think Gen X and millennials can agree on is that the boomers are going to be taking it with them. We aren't going to see any of it.
I think that's one of the things we have to keep in mind, though. I get why, the boomers get a lot of flack just because they've lived in the easiest time to get wealth ever in human history.
Oh, it's brutal. When I hear the parents, the old ladies' parents' stories, I just shake my head. I'm like, I wish I could do that. Yeah, we just flipped houses every 3 years, then lived in Mexico partying for 5. I'm like, what? Dude, I can flip a house and I'll lose money.
Well, I'm looking at my parents now, and they're that generation, and they have their own house that they bought, and they inherited two houses from their parents. So that's just generational wealth right there. If you bought a house when it was cheap, or an apartment in some city in Europe or the US before they got really expensive, that's your retirement fund.
Pretty much.
Well, yeah, I mean, the house my parents live in now is appreciated 7 times since they bought it in the 1970s.
Jeez.
So, I mean, just using that as a metric, and then of course they inherited some money from both of their parents who were born in the 19 teens.
What you have to keep in mind now, though, is that I look at my grandmother's generation, they never spent a lot of money on themselves. They tried to pass on as much as possible. Boomer parents are not going to do that. They're going to go out in a cocaine binge in a Vegas hotel room with a bunch of Instagram models with no money left when they die, for the most part.
Well, I think you're right about the strategy, but I think you're wrong about the location. What they're actually going to do is they're going to do it at the at any of the many retirement homes, like the Villages in the middle of Florida, and they're going to spend it on golf and gonorrhea treatments because of all of the behaviors that they're repeating from when they were in the mid to late 60s, all over again, but in a controlled, warm, safe environment. So that's more of what's happening now instead. I mean, they sell their houses up north. They buy a condo in Ocala someplace and buy their golf cart and go to swinger parties. These 70-year-old people. It's really disgusting.
Oh, isn't that I saw a story about that a couple months back where was it HEP or one of the STDs, I can't remember, is like booming in retirement homes right now.
Yeah, gonorrhea and syphilis are really high.
Them's the ones.
And the reason is that obviously nobody uses condoms because nobody can reproduce at that age. So if you're coming in with something gross, it just gets passed around really quickly to everybody.
Yeah. Oh no, I caught HEP. I'm gonna die in 10 years. Well, I'm 80 now, so I've only got 6 more to go. Doesn't matter.
Oh no, even better. I highlighted this in a piece on Reddit called "The Victim" that they found a cure for Hep C for most people now. I mean, that's another thing to come out of the boomer generation is that we all got inflicted with something, so let's work on this problem for 15 years until they find a literal cure that's just a shot that takes care of their liver if it's healthy enough, and they completely recover from it. So, yeah, if you've got all the resources and you've got a specific problem to your generation, you'll find a solution to it.
Fair enough. But that's the thing too, real estate. So I'm scared with real estate. Obviously, most of the boomers are living in suburbs right now, mid-sized suburbs. It's been hugely subsidized by the cities, but I notice now most people, millennials and younger, want to live in the cities. They don't want to live in the suburbs. They don't want to live in the country.
Yep.
So that's going to be a huge pot of wealth. And other than fresh immigrants, at least in Canada, I don't see many like native-born Canadians buying real estate in the suburbs, not nearly in the same amount. So that's a huge supply, but dwindling demand. Now, I don't know if our immigration is going to cover the deficit or not, but I don't know what's going to happen there. I just know a lot of people are going to suck really bad financially.
Well, I mean, it's almost like we're turning into South America when it comes to how our demographics are going to live around cities, which is kind of strange because what it was before was people with money were fleeing the cities and they were moving out into the suburbs to create some room and safety for themselves and living away from the city with a status symbol. But now everybody is consolidating back to city centers, and all of the more expensive real estate is concentrated around cities. And if there isn't a demand out in the suburbs, what you're going to find is that poorer people are going to live in suburbs, which is kind of the South American model. Everybody is very wealthy right in the middle of the the city center, and then you see all these shacks up on the mountainside around the city. You know, like Rio de Janeiro is a really good example. Mexico City is a really good example.
Oh, dude. And then with the way immigration is going right now, there's such a mishmash of cultures and this eternal September playing out in real time. Like, I can't picture that being too healthy from a stability standpoint.
It is slightly stable in its own way, though, because what you end up doing is you get enclaves of people who are similar culturally, and they teach each other how to survive in that particular, you know, constructive. You know, I just got here. What do I do? And you know, whomever from the old country who's been here 25 years tells them how to survive, and you know, this is how we go about it, and we stick to our own. Back when we used to, you know, actually assimilate people who were coming into the country because we did it at a controlled rate, and we were very xenophobic about it. That was never really a problem. We were never really concerned with having whole immigrant populations living in kind of their own towns around larger city centers. And, you know, that's how it's happening again. It happened when the first wave of immigrants came because there were so many all at once.
Oh, like Little Italy and all that?
Yeah, you got little Italy's, little Ireland's, you know, little Poland's, you know, Moscow on the Hudson, you know, all of these different little in your larger cities. And now it's based mostly on religion, not necessarily, you know, point of origin as far as country is concerned. It's mostly by language and religion.
Yeah, I can buy that. It's freaked me out because I felt. Well, I guess you were talking about like how Michigan has what was it? A big Islamic like enclave there, does it not? Or is it Minnesota? I can never remember. I'm not very good at the states.
Actually, both Michigan and Minnesota do.
Oh, damn.
Minnesota has the Somali population around Minneapolis and Paul. That's why Ilhan Omar is the representative of that particular congressional district where all of those Somali immigrants are from. And then the Arab population from the Middle East proper, you know, we're talking Syrians, Iraqis, and Pakistanis are mostly in Michigan. The Detroit area, just a little bit south and east, particularly one city, Dearborn, is very, very concentrated Muslim population.
Interesting. See, Canada too. I picture it here. Obviously, if you go outside of Toronto, you got Markham, which is 80% Southeast Asian. Every kind of little suburb has its own majority minority population, but I can picture it here because Canada doesn't really have as strong as an identity as America does. For the most part, Canadians will either consider themselves to be the 51st state because they watch too much TV, or they say whatever's not American makes us Canadian. Other than that, we got mac and cheese, Ford trucks, hockey cards, and you know, Tim Hortons, which is kind of weird. Like, our consumer habits are what make us our identity. Never really sat well with me. But America, you guys have there is America. When you picture an American, you have a very clear image in your head, for better or for worse.
Yeah. I mean,
a person wearing one of those flag shorts in a scooter at Walmart, to be honest with you. But I think the biggest thing, though, is America's actually been able to handle immigration because you force people to interact with other people.
Well, they used to.
Because right now in Europe, the problem is all the social welfare systems here means that you get enclaves where people have been living in a country for years and they don't even speak the language because they never have to interact with anyone outside their community.
Yeah, we do have that here in the U.S. too, though, especially in the larger cities. If anybody immigrates to a suburb or a smaller town, I do think that the integration is a little bit faster, at least as far as assimilating to the norms around them.
Oh yeah, well, it's like Reddit.
Yeah, and another thing, you know, we talk about red pill things a lot of times on this show, or at least we try to. America suffers from irrational self-confidence, whether that's a good or a bad thing, and that's part of our identity as well, I think. Also, too, I got an excellent Canadian joke that applies to the situation. Canada had the opportunity to become the greatest nation in the world with American technology, French cuisine, and English culture. Instead, it ended up with French technology, British cuisine, and American culture.
I like that. That's good.
So yeah, I mean, it all depends on how well you take advantage of your resources, and I think Canada hasn't really been forced to do much.
Oh, dude, I was going to tap into this super chat here from One Man Way. The boomers in the West want this immigration to pay the welfare until they die, which is, to be fair, yes. If population isn't growing, then there is nobody underneath to pay. It's like a pyramid scheme.
Yeah, oh, it is. It's a Social Security is a complete Ponzi scheme. The fact is that if you don't have a sufficient population paying in to the system beneath the recipients, the full pay proposition for the benefit that's promised goes away.
Yeah, I remember there was a number or a name for it too. I can't remember the acronym, but it's how many working aged people there are compared to like children and old people. It used to be like a 12-to-1 ratio, and now it's gone to 6-to-1, 3-to-1, 2-to-1. So it's more people or less people having to subsidize more people, and automation. I'm hoping that can solve the problem, but it looks like a lot of people are doubling on the immigration being the solution, which is really just a kicking the can down the road solution anyway.
Yeah, this is technically, I think, what Mr. Yang, the presidential candidate in the U.S., is trying to push forward as a single issue for presidency, is that universal basic income of $1,000 a month to every person could replace Social Security if everyone is forced to do their own savings. Mm-hmm. And if you go ahead and do that instead, you don't have the problem of having a perpetual pay-in system to a person who, in the end, may not benefit from that system at all, having paid in their entire career. So that's the issue that is out there. He's not framing it that way because that would be mean. But that
his wife didn't let him.
yeah, wife didn't let him or whatever. Yeah. Oh my God. That and the I'm on my knees taking whippets to the face. But yeah. And then the biggest coping mechanism for the system after that is, of course, extending the age that you're able to retire before you receive the benefits. So, before it was 62, now it's up to 65 or 67 now, actually. And I think by the time I'm in retirement age, it's going to be into the 70s at least.
Oh yeah, I'm just assuming it's not going to be there by the time I get to retirement age.
Yeah, and if they keep pushing high fructose corn syrup on us, I mean, there's going to be enough of us who aren't going to survive to that age where it may regulate itself by people falling out of eligibility simply by dying too soon. So I mean, if we end up with people from Wall-E world having to get to 70 before they start cashing out, then a lot of that money is going to still be there for quite a long time.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Military had this too, because I remember when I first got in, the the pension was 20 years. You get your pension the day you leave. There was something called double dipping, where if you left and then joined the reserves, you could still earn like your paycheck from the military, plus get your pension, plus build a second one. So you could technically do 20 years Reg Force, 20 years reserves, have two pensions at the end of it. Obviously, it's not financially, it doesn't make sense. So they canceled that one when I first got in. And then they started moving so instead of 20 years, now it's 25 years, and you can't collect your pension until 60, I think it was, unless you sign up. So I technically signed like a 19-year contract to get into the old pension system. And in my 12-year career, I watched them claw back the pension system 3 separate times. And I remember a lot of guys were telling me when I was deciding to get out, this is a ridiculous idea. This is the most stable job you're going to have. I'm like, really, is it though? Like, I've seen them claw this thing back to the point that, like, medical pensions used to be a pension, and now it was a single payout. They actually have a chart. Your whatever body part you lose, this is how much you get paid, like $7,000 for a finger or whatever.
How much for a penis?
You know what? Funnily enough, didn't pop up. I guess nobody gets shot in the dick in the military.
No, I just think it would be curious because, I can see arm, leg, but if you got your dick blown off, what's the point in having all your other limbs?
Carl, I hate to have to admit this, but I've seen it on actuarial charts, what the payout is on a lot of insurance policies for losing genitals. And it's like right around, I believe, 75 to 80% of the full death benefit. They do recognize that losing your junk at a certain age is almost basically ending your life.
You know the worst part? If you lose your uterus, it's like 97%. Like, this wage gap is just ridiculous.
Well, to be honest with you, I kind of get it, though. I mean, if a woman loses her uterus, what good is she? I mean, they are birth machines, aren't they? At least that's what I hear from a convention I'm supposed to attend this fall.
Oh, for crying out loud. You had to bring them into this.
Yeah,
son of a bitch.
The West will be saved by one uterine payout benefit at a time.
Oh, jeez. Oh, yeah, I hear they bring their own cake in a crisis to that thing too, so I can't wait to see that implode.
Yeah, saving the West thing is getting on my nerves. Well, it has been for months. I mean, cultural evolution. Look it up. It happens.
It's not even that. It's at the point now I want to destroy the West personally just to tell them to shut up.
And I've been saying it for a while, and it's not a very popular thing, but too bad. What it boils down to with that whole line of thought is it's save the whites. It's not save the West. It really is. It's now come down to we're going to mix enough race realism into this whole traditional family construct horseshit that we're just simply masking it very, very lightly. This conference isn't about saving men or making men their best. It's about trying to promote, a certain purity standard of people and race.
Yeah, but the beauty of that is you just expand the pool of who counts. Like, remember when Italians didn't count? Well, they count now. Eventually, you'll just dilute the whole what it means to be white to the point where, I mean, I technically count as white by these standards.
Well, but yeah, but I mean, if your name were, Stoneberg, it would.
Depending on who you ask on a certain Reddit forum, I actually do translate to Stoneberg.
Yeah, Sheckelstein.
No, Sheckelstein.
Sheckelstein.
Yeah.
Dude, and as a West Coast, British Columbia, Canadian boy, like, there is zero Jewish people where I was raised and grown up. I didn't meet my first guy, golden child or whatever they call it, until I was like 32. And at that point, I'm still like at the novelty phase where I'm asking about holidays and stuff. Like, I have no concept of the Judeo faith at all.
Yeah, and the thing is that they are, just tilting at windmills about this stuff, and they need to sort themselves out first before they, go outside and start blaming other people.
Yeah, stop building that bunker and start worrying about your diabetes.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for one of these conferences to invite Nick Fuentes to speak, and it'll finally be over. It'll finally be, the groypers and the trads together in some unholy matrimony.
Oh yeah, you put me onto that. I still don't know exactly what a groyper is. The best I've been able to tell, it looks like Milo Yiannopoulos minus the Catholic priest jokes.
Yeah, for the most part, it's short, angry white guys in polo shirts, trying to be ironic about things. I mean,
yeah, and the guy, and you got the one part you put me on, and I kind of like it, is how they, for the most part, a lot of people are trying to speak truth to power. They're like, whatever, this current way of doing things isn't good. They're kind of going after, as best I can tell, the opposition, saying, hey, it was your job to put some common sense onto this, and you failed miserably in your task. That's why they're going after, who's the argument guy? The short,
Ben Shapiro.
That's the one.
Yeah.
That's why they're going after him and not,
plus two, he's Jewish. So I mean, you can, if you can go after a stereotype and a guy who doesn't appear to be diversified enough in his thought, all at the same time, you can make it appear more legitimate.
Fair enough. Oh, speaking of which, so here's the thing: I don't like saving the West. This is my Alex Jones moment. If you guys can go check online right now, there's a website called centuryinitiative.ca.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I know, no, I'm putting the link in the thing here. So this is the Canadian initiative for a bigger, bolder Canada. They're trying to increase the population from 35 million to 100 million in 30 years. So a single generation. Whatever remains of Canada is going to be eternal Septembered out, which, better or worse, not really putting a spin on it now. The funny part is when you look at the people running this. The main guy is a guy called Dominic Barton. He's a managing director at McKinsey & Co. If the name sounds familiar, he was that guy that got in trouble from the World Banking Organization for paying off a bunch of African despots, bribery charges and that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, he's a Ugandan-born London national who's got the ear of the Canadian government and is essentially driving our immigration policy. So at this point, whatever I think of as my Canada, and yeah, like Carl put it best, like the cultural growth or shifting, whatever. Mm-hmm. Whatever I think Canada is in 30 years, it's not going to be there. And I just have to be okay with that. And like you said, prepare myself to make sure whatever it does become, I'm well situated in it to have a wonderful life with good people around me.
Yeah, I think
that's if you look at Germany, that's a great example. 30 years ago, it was when you need to get something to eat when you've been out drinking.
Yeah,
it was all sausage. Then fast forward 10 years, then it's all McDonald's, all American shit.
Right.
Now it's all kebab joints.
Oh yeah. I as far as a evening food choice, I think that's a vast improvement over the prior two.
All right. Actually, here, sorry, quick. One of these guys is asking about Eternal September, and I was gonna type it, but I'm like, it might be easier just to explain.
Okay.
Back in, and you guys probably know this one already. So back in the old days when there was Usenets, like news groups, people used to log online, and that's how they would chat amongst each other. A bunch of hobbyists on all different types of topics. And what would happen is during September in the early 90s, mid 90s, is that a lot of students would get access to the internet. So what these guys found is they had their little groups, they had social norms, everybody kind of knew how to act around each other. And during September, so many new people would join their forums that they couldn't keep those social norms going, and it kind of regressed to the mean. And you ended up, same as when you think about how the internet is toxic, but if you go to your small little enclave, it's like a good built community. So Eternal September is essentially adding people into an organization too many, too fast in order to adopt the normalcy of that group. And so they end up just taking whatever into there and they build it and they basically shit all over it. And it kind of applies to everything, essentially. Immigration, you could say for better or for worse, but if you add, and I think the number was 12%, don't quote me on that. If you add, let's say 12% to a population, whatever social norms that original population had is not going to be assimilated with the new group. The new group is essentially going to be driving the ship. I think is that a fair way to describe it, you guys figure?
Yeah, it reminds you what happened on our Reddit forum we all know about when suddenly someone decided to bring in a whole new population and completely change the whole thing.
Glyven.
Yeah. I mean, I don't give any glowing reviews of any that type of that behavior, but no, the issue there, I think too, Ryan, is that those systems age out quickly though too. I don't know if it is a similar phenomena when your turnover point is at a maximum 6 years or so. Because I mean, if people are using, let's say, these forums during their entire time as an undergraduate,
right,
and you're having a 12% turnover, and the seniors are leaving school, and they say, "Well, fuck this, I don't care," then yeah, I mean, it's very easy to have a 12% drive, a culture shift within that particular community. If that were the case where everyone is in the same community, and dealing with the same norms for 60, 70 years, and you can bring in 12% of people. I have a feeling that the pushback by the remaining 88% would be a little bit higher in that particular circumstance. But I could be wrong. I don't know.
Well, I'm pessimistic about it. I always find, everybody always loves to talk about the silent majority. Like the silent majority hates PC culture. The silent majority hates this. The silent majority doesn't say they're feminist.
No, the silent majority generally doesn't give a crap about anything because they're too dumb to really care. I mean,
they just don't want to raise any ruckus or cause any conflict. And which I find it makes it worse because then you get a group of people that essentially just go along to get along.
Yeah. Carl, you know this faster than I do. What's the percentage of people who fall within one standard deviation of the mean generally?
With IQ?
With just about anything.
68%.
66.8.
Okay, so I mean, if you consider people who are slightly smarter than average, slightly dumber than average, slightly interested than average, slightly less interested than average, there's your majority of people who are just living their day-to-day lives. And then you have the outliers on either side who either need the system completely or are trying to change the system because they're outliers and they're malcontents anyway. So, those are your drivers. Tails are always your drivers. Mm-hmm. And, the people who are grinding away at, a 45-hour-a-week job with 2 kids and a mortgage to pay, most of this shit doesn't matter to them at all. They just want to see, the Dancing with the Stars at 9:00 every Monday evening or whenever that show's on.
Wasn't that a lot of guys like Tim? Is it Tim Cook, that one professor who said women cry in the office or whatever? That's when usually it comes to normies' doorsteps. That's when they start to care. Which, to be fair, these aren't exactly common cases that everybody knows somebody, but.
Yeah. I mean, I just have a feeling that a lot of things, particularly on Twitter and Reddit, are overblown because
that's an understatement.
well, it's because they're communities with a particular interest that are interested in their particular communities. You know what I mean? It's the circling of the jerks and the crab buckets, and most people don't have time to deal with too much of that stuff, and it's a lot of noise and very little signal.
So one thing I always liked about the married red pill, that the two things: first, automatic culling of anybody who's not useful. Like right there is something that's kind of been unique to that space. If you're not there to help men through their failing marriages or failing relationships, then get out.
Yeah, I mean that's always good, but at the same time, it's now got 31,000, 32,000 members. When I started, there was like 9.
Oh, I know.
So I mean, what are people doing? Are they just not deleting their accounts when they're quote unquote fixed, or is it voyeurism? Is it we tried but we're going to stick around and see what other people say? I don't know. But
I think it's a combination of all the above for the most part.
Yeah.
Growth is the good thing about growth is it just tells you who's new. Not so much like if you keep growing and growing, it doesn't mean you're necessarily getting bigger. It just means you're getting an influx of new people all the time. That's the only thing I can really take for it as a solid.
Yeah, I mean, if there were some way to remove people after a period of inactivity or something, I think that would be a greater indicator of the actual quote unquote community, as opposed to legacy and people who are just too lazy to unsubscribe from that particular sub.
That's a problem with social media altogether, though, because YouTube won't do it, Reddit won't do it, Twitter won't do it, because it makes them look good when everybody has these huge counts. So everybody just loves these internet pixels to show them how important they are.
I think the biggest issue, though, with social media is that it becomes very easy for, let's say, the 80%, the average people and the dumb fucks, to gang up and have their actually be relevant. Because it was something I was thinking about. Number one is Twitter is not real life. I wish people would understand that, because if you look at my Twitter feed, you think the West was burning. All women are out there doing constant gangbangs. and interracial gangbangs at that, just to make sure you piss off the racists as well. And that's not reality. Like, you see the statistics with the millennials are having less sex than every other generation that we have statistics for. Yet you would think that they're fucking a lot more based on all the people who claim to have, 3-digit notch counts on Twitter.
No, the tails are driving.
Well, that's kind of why I stopped using Twitter as much. It's just the fact that it's not an accurate reflection of reality. It's more like a collection of the guys screaming like a madman at Piccadilly Square at Speaker's Corner.
Oh, dude, wow, that's a nice Canadian reference. But dude, I did that with the Patreon guys on Friday. I'm like talking to them a bit about the social media and how like you strategize around it. I'm like, look, all you do is you piss people off, build some group solidarity, and then some people join you to see, wow, this guy's speaking some controversial stuff. And then hopefully you keep them around long enough to show content. And I gave him an example. Did a tweet yesterday, basically. I'm like, yeah, whatever. MGTOWs are doing anything but going their own way, and that's the problem. I'm like, I don't care about this. I just came up with this on the fly. And then sure enough, you watch it, and it's just full of people like arguing about it incessantly. I'm like, there's your red pill, fellas. I don't care. Nobody cares, but these guys are all invested in it. The only reason it exists is so that way you get more eyeballs on you, and hopefully you can drive them to something useful.
Hey, that's why I pick at tradcons and Christians all the time.
Yeah, for the most part. The easy one to trigger.
No, but I don't really care what they do. I mean, they can live in the woods and go out logging and shit, for all I care. And I get to get some more Twitter followers. I mean, let's be honest, a real trad wouldn't be on social media using modern internet marketing tools to sell his life vision.
Oh, I agree. She'd be too busy to take off the sun hat. She'd be in the kitchen more, popping out the eighth kid.
Like tomorrow when it's Sunday and it's church time, I'm going to sit there and be like, hey, why aren't you in church, trads? Why are you on Twitter?
Yes, that's right.
But that's the whole thing about trad. Like one guy asked, like, when you mean trad, do you mean Catholics? I'm like, no. I already know Catholic for the most part and Christian stuff. It's the secular trads, the ones that kind of want everything to do with Christianity, but they still want to watch football on Sundays. Those are the ones that kind of bug me because they really are cherry picking what they want out of their life to be the absolute perfect Norman Rockwell painting.
No, but to them, sports ball is tradition.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, that's why now in baseball you've got guys arguing that batting average is still the best indicator of an offensive player's effectiveness. While you've got all these new school guys saying that no, it's on base percentage or some other metric that determines whether or not somebody is a good player. Wins against replacement, the WAR, statistic. So I mean, again,
out of all the notes to swap, they have to pick the most meaningless ones.
Well, the whole thing that I find funny with that is everything has been nerdified or spreadsheetified. It doesn't matter what hobby you're into. Everyone has that goddamn spreadsheet, and it's kind of sucking the fun out of things. I noticed that with dating when I was tracking everything with Tinder. Kind of sucks the fun out of it.
Well, see, that was the thing. That's what drove me towards gamification of my dating life at the time. Was because if it was just dating for the sake of dating, granted, this is because at the time I was no good at it, but turning it into a game was something I could actually track. It was progress. As opposed to just, well, the girl and I didn't work out. No idea what happened. I'll just bobblehead along. But you are right. Once you get to that point where you kind of know what you're doing, tracking becomes counterproductive. But I think that applies to everything, not just dating.
Yeah. And there is always, that outlier that really becomes the cautionary tale. And that is spreadsheet guy.
Oh, yeah, that dude.
Spreadsheet guy versus Skittles man.
That's right. Spreadsheet guy, the guy who literally kept score of when his wife turned him down, and finally he was so frustrated with it that he pulled it out and said, "Look, here's all the times and all the reasons and all the excuses why you've turned me down for sex. What are you going to do about it?"
No, that wasn't the story. She was actually going away for a 10-day business trip. And he sent the spreadsheet to her in an email where he said, "I'm pretty much not going to miss you."
Oh yes, yeah, but the premise is still the same. Is that every time she turned him down, he he definitely wrote it down when it was and the reason why.
Yeah, I remember my favorite reason in there too was Friends was on.
Yeah.
Hey,
Imagine getting cucked by Friends.
she's a woman of the 90s. She's got her priorities in order.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The best excuse I've ever had was, no, we're at the Eiffel Tower and it's public.
Oh, that sucks. Public is the fun one. Hope you ditched her right away.
Well, the Eiffel Tower would have been a fun notch too. Have sex in all the weirdest places. I think the hardest one is going to be that black crystal in the middle of Mecca.
Dude, if you could pull that off and survive, I'll be impressed.
Just have to wait until Trump invades.
Mm-hmm. But I like that, though. I guess we'll tie it back to the topic here. It kind of works for investing, too, because I have a bunch of buddies who love doing the day trading stuff. Like my brother was into that, too.
Silly.
Yeah, well, it is silly because first off, they're checking it every day and their emotional state would rise and fall. It's essentially gambling.
Yeah, it is. It's essentially Twitter for investing.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to pin some type of luck or unknown
Chakra.
secret vibe knowledge to know when something is going up or going down. And again, this is where you can plot as many data points as you want, but sometimes the market isn't going to behave the way that all of your indicators tell you it's going to.
Yeah, because it's not a math problem. It's people's psychology at work. And you put 500 idiots in front of a screen, of course they're going to have 500 stupid reasons to make the changes they make.
Well, and not only that, too, if there are enough people making those stupid changes, they will have an impact on the market, but not for any reason other than emotion.
Nope.
And that's really bad when a market is driven by emotion. And that's one of the reasons why I haven't, gone all in, so to speak, on crypto, is because I don't see it tied to a real need as of yet. And
it's like a laser solution in search of a problem.
Well, kind of, in a way. I mean, if we all want a decentralized currency. We all want privacy, and we all want something that is tied to a specific metric that has a limit. And Bitcoin ostensibly could, take care of all of those issues when it comes to money. But the problem is that we still value it in terms of other currency that isn't run on any of those precepts. Mm-hmm. So, how do you value your Bitcoin? Well, it's a Bitcoin. Well, no, it's how many dollars can you get for it? How many euro can you get for it?
Pretty much.
And
that's been my problem with it too.
Yeah, I mean, it behaves more like a commodity than it does a currency at this point, and that's the issue. Until there's large scale adoption of it, it's really hard to put a value on it other than what people are willing to pay for it.
True.
Plus,
well, baseball cards.
You have to keep in mind with Bitcoin too that it's not a professional investors market, so you can avoid the massive market movements because a lot of these stocks owned at the stock exchanges are owned by institutions or by professionals. So a couple of 100,000 guys investing a little bit and doing something dumb and emotional won't have as much effect as that one broker at was it Goldman in New York who put a zero too much when he was shorting Procter and Gamble and almost crashed the stock exchange.
I remember that.
Yes.
But at the same time, China bans Bitcoin, and all of a sudden the market tanks too. So with all those small people, one big fish can move it. But that's not my problem. My only problem is there's two parts. I don't see how you can spend something on Bitcoin. Like as soon as you could buy a pack of gum with it, I'll start taking it seriously as a currency. And then, which ties into the reason you can't, is because of velocity. If I want to sell Bitcoin, I have to wait for the blockchain to update. And right now, it's just too cumbersome a process to be able to make smaller purchases with it.
Yeah, it has the nice portions of privacy and security when it comes to dealing in actual transactions.
Yeah,
but the transactions themselves take, depending on how large they are, upwards of 18-20 minutes to clear, depending on how busy the chain is and whether or not power is running to all of those mining facilities.
Yeah. So once I see those things kind of, once somebody has a problem solution for those things, I'd probably be a lot more invested in it myself. But then again, I'm not the crypto millionaire. That's you right now.
Well, that's not even me right now, but I have the potential to make quite a bit of money in Bitcoin because I own it, and most people don't. So I mean that is something I have an advantage of in that regard. It's something like money I don't rely on, and it's just sitting there in a commodity that could go up exponentially.
True.
Well, I think that's a sensible thing too. I mean, I've always had a philosophy with investing that 80% of my investments need to be safe, stable things. And then you have 20% that's kind of the play money that goes towards Bitcoins or gold mines in Africa or tech startups.
Right.
So they're essentially things that they could go 10 times over or they could go to zero just as easily. So I just like to keep some of those just to have fun with it. But the 80%, I just tank that into usually value investing stocks. So stocks that regularly pay dividends, stable companies. And I have a manager who does it for me because I can't sit there. I mean, I would rather have one guy who's 100% focused on my money with his 60 hours a week at work as opposed to me doing it in 2 hours a night on a Saturday after I've been drinking.
Yeah, I literally have an algorithm taking care of it 24/7. So I mean that's where I'm at with it. I don't even have a person at this point. So you know it is what it is, but if it's that job of that particular program or that particular person to do that and they get paid to do it, then you know that frees up my time to make more money in the event that things go sideways with, like you said, that 20% or even up to 50% of what's already invested. The thing is that most people don't understand is that investing is not like wine. You can't do it later. You can't wait on it, and the results will improve. In fact, you need to do it more sooner than later, even when you feel the pinch a little bit, so you can reap the rewards later on. So you don't have to be working in your 60s and 70s.
That's the other thing that gets me, by the way, about Bitcoin is that investing like wine thing. So Bitcoin's deflationary, right? There's only so many million Bitcoins that are ever going to be produced, and after that, you can
21 million, but it can be subdivided
forever.
So it's kind of
it's deflationary.
It's kind of not.
But that's the thing, because so with fiat currency, say what you will about it, it always increases. There's always more capital coming in, so it encourages people to spend more, and it creates more velocity. Mm-hmm. With the deflationary currency, and I may be just an ignorant on this one, I hope you guys will sort me out if so, it encourages people to save and to hoard it. And then I find that's another thing I can't get past. Like, how are you going to have a currency when basically everybody who wants to make money is incentivized to hold it as long as possible?
Well, that was the problem with being on the gold standard for so long for most countries.
Yeah.
Well, I do like the idea of the gold standard, though, just because we see what happens when we don't have it. Because right now there are no limits to politicians printing money. And I don't like the idea of politicians being in charge of anything, let alone something as important as currency.
True.
Well, in America, it's not even politicians, though. It's appointed people to a pseudo governmental agency,
an NGO.
Yeah, pretty much. But it's an American-based NGO, so I mean it's better that way.
Yeah, we have Bank of Canada, which it's a crown corp, so the Treasury Minister, I believe, is the sole shareholder. Which I'm not sure if that's a better or worse way to organize it. I just know it is.
Yeah. I mean, you make it appear semi-independent, so it doesn't have an error of being manipulated by the people in charge of your roads. And you've seen your roads, so.
Yes, I have. What roads? See, that's always the joke. I know it's another Canadian joke where they show what was it, driving sober versus driving drunk. And driving sober, it's like you're going in a straight line, but hitting all the potholes and damaging your car. But driving drunk, you swerve just perfectly to avoid everything.
Yeah, that or you're up on the sidewalk where it's nice and smooth.
Yeah. Good thing about the snow days, it fills all the potholes in Montreal.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the issue here isn't really, what it is that you need to do in order to beat something or to game something. It's consistency over time.
I agree.
And another thing that I would recommend is if you have the opportunity to become your own boss at some point in time, do it. That way you can place a value on your time that's even greater than, what you're being paid by, some company. And if you can start charging money for not even being there sometimes, that along with passive investments, you can be making money in your sleep, and that's the best way to live at that point.
Oh yeah, dude, if you can put up with the temporary pain, like I left 6 figures plus to come start this thing here, and it's like a huge pay cut at first, but then as my IP builds and as the revenue streams build, it slowly creeps back up to that. I'm not quite at a spot yet where I can replace that income wholly, but it's like an investment, like you said. Sure, eventually I'll get back to like 120K a year, but it's a little bit of pain in the short term. But once I do get there, it's much less work than I would have had to do corporate side. So I can see it being.
Yeah, and
that's probably why people don't do it, because of that temporary short-term pain.
Well, that was also my thinking with it. Is I can work for someone until I'm about in my 40s or 50s.
Mm-hmm.
50 is the absolute latest. After that, I don't want to have a boss ever again. So the idea after that is, if I do work, it'll be just because I want to do it. But I also don't want to have to actually earn money for a living. So if I want to go and lay on a beach for 6 months, I can, and it won't hurt me in the least bit. But to do that, you need to build revenue streams and ways to earn money that are independent of your scalability, which is something I wanted to touch on with stocks instead of bank accounts. Stocks scale, bank accounts don't. The money in your bank will eventually be worth a lot less than it is today just because of inflation, whereas a stock, that will rise with inflation.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, it's even worse now, Carl, because if you take on consumer debt, your rate of returns don't even make any sense in comparison to what it is that you're being charged for debt servicing. So, like, take for example, I don't know, Bank of America. Their average credit card, I believe, is around 17% here in the U.S. And as a perk, if you're a credit card owner, a lot of times they'll say, well, if you do your banking with us, we can put you in a savings account that pays 2.5%. Okay, well, why can't you just charge me 10% on my credit card and not have to offer me a savings account that doesn't even offset 4% or 5% of what it is that you're charging me in interest? It's because they want to use your money and they want to charge you money simultaneously. So this is the problem too, is that a lot of people, they don't save and they have debt. But even when they do have debt, it's with people that give their money back to them in the form of interest at a rate so low that it doesn't even faze them in the least, and they get to play with your money that's sitting there in savings and invest it on their own to make money on top of what it is. So be the owner of the Bank of America stock, not an investor in a bank account or a customer when it comes to their credit cards. That's the best way to use one of those banks as opposed to being used by them.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I love credit cards for that. So many debt-ridden idiots are subsidizing me. Like for mine, it's just straight up cash back. Once a year, it's like 3% of all my purchases, 5% of gas. I can't remember the exact numbers right now. So at the end of the year, because I always pay mine off beginning every month,
yep,
I get a good couple, like at least a few grand at the end of the year just for using my credit card and paying it off. And I realized the reason they can do that is because most people carry debt from month to month, and they're essentially subsidizing me for spending money. It's all those little things there I really enjoy when you can take advantage of other people's lack of willpower.
Sure. Yeah.
And I know and that's the thing. It's not, you're going to retire off of it, but I always like it. It's free money for me.
No, and mine it's airline miles. I mean, you get a card with 25, a credit limit of like 25, 30 grand on it, and it's a miles card, and you put all of your expenses on it, pay it off at the end of every month, pay your $195 membership fee a year, and you get 50,000 miles a year.
Oh, dude, that must be good too, because for your business expenses, you basically treat that as your general ledger. So if everything's going through that.
Yeah, correct. And it's very easy to track, and for tax purposes, it's literally a spreadsheet. So yeah.
I like that. Another one too, and I guess I'll do this one. Carl, you guys both probably know this. So for my industry before this, information security, it was a great transition from my military career. And I found something, and I think lawyers are dealing with this too, is when you look at what does the job entail, if you want to talk about investing. Information security, usually pretty good. Most people come from tech areas. But then you got automation and a lot of people from the third world coming up that are going to surpass anything I could ever do in tech. But you find that they leave a huge gap in being able to deal with the business side. So just being able to talk to people. And I picture law doing the same thing, where between OCR and a lot of automated systems, you're not reading through thousands of bits of paperwork and discovery anymore. But they can't really automate or outsource you talking to a jury or to a judge. And so I find another good investment is just getting good at those people skills, because that's the one thing that we're not going to be able to automate. And I see a lot of guys focusing so much on their technical skills that they're really missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be a need for people who can wiggle information out of others.
Yeah.
And
or just translate it from one business to another business, person to person. Like you just can't automate that.
Right, and generally you can't. And also, I don't think you can build trust automatically either, nor rapport, and all of those things are strictly human characteristics.
Okay, a little bit of a change here, though. I see JD dropped in. This is why money Twitter frustrates me. They are anti-saving for some reason. Yeah, because everyone on money Twitter is broke. They're making money through selling you on their idea that they can make a lot of money, but they have not been able to be successful at making a lot of money with their own program. That's most of them anyway.
Right. And another thing about it too is that people a lot of times are more interested in making money than they are saving, because making more money is more interesting.
Oh yeah, it's more fun.
It's more fun to spend and floss. I mean, everybody needs a Rolex, everybody needs a Lambo. That's kind of the
validation seeking
the
with a cost.
Twitter thing, yeah, exactly. And
dude, that drives me nuts.
And Brandon B's got a question about the origin of my name. I explained this during the first episode I was on with Ryan. Technically, it's a character name within a character in a movie about porn. So Boogie Nights, there's a guy by the name of Reed Rothschild, and his character in one of the porn movies that he's in with Dirk Diggler, his character name is Chest Rockwell. So that's the origin of my YouTube persona. So now you know.
I was going to say, with the whole money Twitter thing too, it's kind of like with the workout Twitter. You're not going to make a lot of money by saying do strong lifts 5v5, count your calories, and get enough protein. You're not going to sell an ebook and 12 months of coaching with that. You're not going to sell 12 months of coaching in a book by telling people stop spending your money on dumb shit.
Yeah, that's the thing too. It's not about not ever spending money. It's about not losing it like a sieve. And I can't think of a worse way to lose money than status purchases. Like the Rolex, the Lambo. Like, no offense, I know Kate's got one. Yeah, the wife. But that's the thing. If you're with a 2-income family, your wife is no longer a depreciating asset. She's appreciating. So even when the wall hits, well, she gets a good paycheck. All those things that purple pill women love to brag about. It's like, yeah, as long as you were hot when you were 18, your income will work when you're 50.
yeah. I mean, the thing is that in that regard, I actually think hot girls are at a disadvantage.
Because they don't have to be anything more.
And let me let me explain. The problem is that there will be some guy out there until she is probably at least 30 who will allow her to live the summer vacation lifestyle. Meaning during the winter time, she'll bundle up, put on 10 pounds, go to work in an office someplace doing some menial thing to make ends meet for 6-7 months out of the year, and then April will roll around, and then from then until September she'll have dudes taking her places, and she lives the late spring break, summer break lifestyle for 10-12 years in a row.
I actually sorry, go ahead.
And she ends up with having nothing once she starts wall approaching, and her early to mid 30s, and no appreciable skills or a degree that doesn't really pay anything, and then she's scrambling to find a provider. And if she doesn't find a provider, she's going to live a subsistence lifestyle until she unfortunately passes away with 4 cats and an apartment.
Well, speaking of guys automating things, we've kind of advanced so far that I don't think thirst will ever not meet the demand at this point. Some of the horrible girls are really lining up some solid men now, and I can't explain it.
Yeah, I mean that is weird.
I would say though, if you're going to go for a girl and you want to get into like a steady relationship, get one that's 10 to 15 years younger than you. Only accountable for guys over 35, by the way. Don't do that if you're 18.
Thank you for the preface.
Well, I have to say it. It's one of those dumb things we have to say because people take things literally, and suddenly, here are these red pillars on the internet telling 18-year-olds to bang 3-year-olds. And it's like, oh, dude, come on.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. Dude, I made don't eat paint warnings a thing in this space.
So anyway, my thing with this, if you get a girl with a good work ethic, that's kind of one of the most important things you can actually have in a girl. A girl that knows how to work and she has a good work ethic, because she'll put that effort into other things too. Worst thing is to have someone who expects you to do everything. It's a bad investment. Why would you invest in something that isn't something that appreciates? If your girl works hard, she'll be making money until she retires, same as you. You'll have twice as much money at that point, and you don't have to buy her a ton of shit. Because that's like status purchases go. Sugar babies are probably the worst one.
Well, I think trads are too, though. That's the thing. How many guys find out their wife is pregnant and then automatically have to redo an entire room of their house and buy the $1,000? Like, it's almost as bad as a sugar baby, except for at the end, you don't even get the date.
The end, you're not even getting laid.
Baby stroller. Yeah, exactly.
And then she gives birth, and then that whole area is off limits for a while. And it's never the same. I mean, not to be off color here or anything, but a woman giving birth naturally, it's kind of like renting your house out to certain groups of people. Sure, you can get that crack house smell out of it, and you can paint it over, but it's never quite as good ever again.
Wow, how saving the West of you.
Yeah, fortunate. I was fortunate. None of the rooms were destroyed by any wrecking balls coming through. Both of my kids were delivered via C-section, so I was fortunate in that regard.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, you're right though. Generally the first floor suffers from major flood damage after an event like that.
Yeah, and then you have to start using the basement. That was never really my thing.
Now the status, and back to the other part, the status purchases as a flex. It's the great post by Last Psychiatrist. I don't know if you guys follow his stuff at all, but he's a great shrink that talks about narcissism. And he does bring up a good point. If you're buying stuff for flexing, and the British will know this better than anybody, they know all you can tell is that somebody who's trying too hard. Because if you really are an upper crust person who actually has status, then you probably learned in boarding school what you need to do to have that status. And they all know each other. Like, what is it, the Blue Bloods? Isn't that what you guys have, Chesty? Like
Well,
there's a list of people who know who's who.
well, I mean, we have old money, and then of course, you know, there's the nouveau riche and the Silicon Valley rich who are the really rich now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but back before then, it was all Mayflower crew, and you know, the daughters of the American Revolution assholes, and then it became, you know, the Midwestern guys who made a lot of money and are now considered older money. But now, I mean, most of the wealth is technology money. But I mean, getting back to the point of, you know, flexing, I mean, you know people who know value, and when they're flexing and when they're not. I mean, if I see a guy in a meeting who's in jeans, a crisp white shirt, but he's wearing, you know, a Rado wristwatch, you know, I know that he's not doing it for the attention. It's also the woman with a Hermes handbag as opposed to a Louis Vuitton handbag. You know, one has almost zero markings on it whatsoever. The other is a billboard from the sky, you know, with the big LV symbols all over it. And one is 1/10 the price of the other.
Which is hilarious too. The whole reason that they put those stupid symbols on it is because you can't copyright a purse design, so they have to throw the logos on it because you can at least defend that.
Yeah, but the problem is that it's still the most counterfeited thing in the universe. So I mean, you have the double problem. You have a poser problem, even if you own the real thing, because a $1,500 bag in a, you know, amongst millionaires is trash. And you know, a $150 knockoff of it that looks almost identical to it lowers the appreciation for the brand anyway. So I mean, you combine those two things together, it's kind of a push. And it's the same thing, you know, people used to be with polo shirts and Alan Edmonds shoes and things like that. You know, we're talking
looking like the villain in an 80s ski movie.
right, exactly. And it's all entry level, you know, flex stuff. It's like that guy online with the Audi A7, you know, like grandpa's Audi, not the supercar, but you know, just expensive enough to get somebody's attention, but not really, you know, be a real symbol of status. And that's what I'm seeing more and more. You know, back in the early 2000s, it was people buying, you know, the C250 and C300 Mercedes, you know, for 28 grand. You know, like, oh, nice. You know, you own a Mercedes Benz. Congratulations. You know, it's a lot of it is people trying to look a certain part, but they really don't have the status.
Well, you can always see that, though. It's not that hard to see it when someone is trying to fake a part, because people within, I mean, we had that discussion earlier, Chasta, it was probably 6-8 months ago, about billable hours and how much you can realistically make in your first 1 to 3 years in an industry.
Oh yeah, that was hilarious.
Yeah, and it was immediately obvious that either the billable hours are off or the income is off, because you cannot get that sort of income on a one-man billable hours thing unless you have an obscene enough rate that you could hire, you know, a full team from McKinsey or something.
But at that point, it would have been somebody you would have known who he was at that point. So it can't just be some nobody.
Yeah, same thing that Chest is saying about, okay, you know what? You have a Louis Vuitton handbag or a Hermes, or you have something that shows that you are a certain thing, but people who are that thing would never be seen with it. And that's just a signal in itself. It says, I'm LARPing. Like, you see a guy and you hand him a gun and he kind of holds it with 2 fingers. It's pretty obvious that he's not around guns much.
Dude, that's why I love Alibaba and AliExpress. It's totally killed that mystique of those flex purchases.
Yeah, wish.com, another thing too.
You go on there. Yeah, I've seen it. Like, you grab counter, and I used to have to fly down to Dubai or sail down to Dubai or Southeast China, and then you go haggle it there at the souks. But yeah, you see these guys talking about, look at this, it's amazing. Like, yeah, I kind of saw them make it they made that Louis Vuitton in China. Then they sent it over to France. France took a tag, put it on top, and that's a $2,000 markup.
And you know, in my world, I mean, I'm cool with buying quality things for a lot of, like, I just dropped about $3,000 on a new desktop computer just because I wanted to, but because that's going to last me at least 5-6 years at least. But
Yeah.
and, my straight racer is a German one made with some of the best steel from a little town called Solingen in Germany. It's probably the best straight racers you can get in the world, but they're not all that expensive. And buying quality, it lasts longer. The only time I've actually considered it with, cheap knockoff power tools in some cases, because you can afford to replace them like 8 times for the price of a better one.
Well, that's the thing. People who know what they're doing can see those purchases and they kind of instinctively know why you did that. Like if I see you with a cheap power drill, I know, oh, he either doesn't use it very much or he just gets rid of it every couple of years because the battery dies off. And they always change the model so you can never replace the battery with a new purchase.
So that's just the thinking that buy quality for what you need to be quality. Like if I see someone who buys the Bosch Blue series of power tools, I know that they're either a professional or someone who thinks they are.
Yeah.
All right, one sec. I gotta quickly.
Yeah.
I already told this guy here. Come on. Gotta quickly do a ban. Look, guys, in the chat too. I know this is a bit of my Donovan moment here, but there's a lot of people I work with, and I agree with what they do, and I think it's fine. If you want to vent about them, that's fine. I'll say your piece, but once I say, okay, we're done here, don't continue to hammer down the point. You know who you are.
Chat.
It's just guys talking smash about Rich. And like, look, I get it. You don't have to like Rich. You don't have to like his product, but I basically am not going to sit here and have people like slagging people that I work with and enjoy working with. If it's somebody that's an idiot, go for it.
Well, the thing with... I can get on to that because, like, if you're very interested in cars and you have a lot of disposable income, I don't blame you for spending some of that on cars. I know guys who hunt who spend $10,000 a year on new optics.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, Rich. It's not a flex purchase for him. He takes that thing on rallies. Like, that's a working toy.
And the same thing with having a nice house. It's, of course, you have a nice house if you have the money for it. Like, I prefer apartments because I hate fucking painting houses, but well, the thing with having a house is it's constant maintenance, and I own enough property that when I'm done having all of it painted, it's time to start again.
Yes, that's true.
It's like you're never done. So I kind of hate having that. So I prefer to live in apartments for that reason. Plus, I'd rather live in an apartment near the bars and restaurants in a city as opposed to being way out in the fucking boondocks.
Dude, condos are great for that. I don't have to mow a lawn. I don't have to worry if there's a plumbing problem. I call somebody. Like, it takes time. It gives me back time. And I'm more than happy to pay syndicate, or I guess they call them condo fees here. More than happy to pay that to offshore this stuff.
And it's actually one of the funnier things I've noticed recently, because I started taking all my clothes to a dry cleaning shop that fixes everything, and I get this stuff back ironed. I have a maid service that comes to my house and cleans it once a week. And I have all my groceries and beer and everything delivered to my doorstep.
Ooh, do you like that? Because the old lady and I have been talking about starting that up.
Oh, I love it, because the best thing is I can sit at work during my lunch hour on Tuesday, and I can just do all the stuff I would need to go to the store for on Friday. And I get that delivered when I get home from work. So it saves me not only, the store is on my way home, but A, I don't have to cart a bunch of shit to my apartment. B, I don't have to deal with the lines you get at a store in a city on a Friday when everyone's there at the same time after work. And they just come here and they just deliver. It's very easy. So the only thing you have to do is plan a little bit. They're not that expensive either.
Well, for me, for the produce thing, we were wondering, like, do they just try and offload the stuff that's almost going to go bad, or would they pick it the same way if you were to go there and pick your vegetables?
Oh, I have never had the problem with vegetable qualities or use by dates on any of the food.
I think you just sold me on it then. That's awesome.
You know, the company is where you are, but here the vegetables are just as fresh as if you'd go to the store.
Yeah, I mean, Carl's basically outsourced Tradwife without any of the drawbacks. So,
there's the thing too. So if all that trad stuff is outsourced in the same way that plow horse masculinity is outsourced, like, what's left?
Correct. What kind of value can somebody bring to your life after everything can be delivered to your door without any expectations?
Well, my reasoning was just very simple with the whole thing is, okay, so I pay the guy who does my laundry. It runs me about, what, 20, $30 a week. The grocery stuff, there's like a $10 delivery fee or something, or let's say just add 2% to whatever my grocery bill was.
Yeah.
The maid service runs me like $400 a month, but it saves me about, so all of this in total saves me about 10 hours a month, maybe 12. If I can take half of those hours and I spend those at work, and I can bill a client between $200 and $400, depending on what the contract rate is, I cover those costs with 2 hours. It's just much more efficient.
Yeah, it's the time is the constant. You claw back that, or even if not, like picture this. Me for the grocery trip, that's probably an hour and a half out of my day just for transport and shopping. I claw that back. If I'm so busy that hour and a half I could just spend sitting there and watching paint dry and, relax, I'll gladly take that too. What's the point of having money if all you're going to do is hoard it? And if I'm going to buy some things there's no difference between paying 2% for your groceries than just buying a bottle of booze and then de-stressing after work. Same money there, same result. The only difference is I'm not killing my liver while I do it. No offense, Carl.
Oh, my liver is, I'm getting notes of hatred from it. But, my liver can die. I'll just
that's right. Livers can repair. Aren't they the only organ that can come back to life?
And you can get transplants without a big problem. And I have a large family, so it's no problem to get a liver donor if I need one.
I don't know, man. I watch the movies. Once you get somebody's organ, if they're a serial killer, you start murdering for them.
Yeah, but I'm already murdering, so who cares?
Oh, slaying that poon.
No, but my thing with anything I can do to save time and actually spend that time on either something that makes me money or something I find enjoyable, because you need that balance. Because I think everyone has those periods where they go hard as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that for a limited, like I had a period of my life. I think I worked 80, 90 hours a week for the better part of a year and a half. And okay, I made good money doing it. The problem was I saved a lot of money just because I didn't have any time to spend anything.
Yeah.
Because my life was go to work, get home, eat dinner, sleep, then back to work.
Oh man, I love
that. You feel like hot garbage afterwards. I mean, it's hard on you, regardless of what kind of shape you're in or how well you're prepared for it. It's the mental strain of working on tasks, 80, 90 hours a week is brutal. It really is.
Well, it's the one beauty of deployments, though, is you're always on this kind of adrenaline rush on it because there's literally nothing else to do. If I'm away from the home for 6 months, working 16-hour days, it was either that or I just sit there and there's like no electricity, no internet. So I'm like, well, I can either go back to work or I can just go to sleep, and I've already slept.
Yeah, but
But you are right, though. At the end is when you start to get that burnout and you realize, all right, it's time to pull this back.
But and also that messes with your wiring a little bit too, depending on whether or not you have an addictive personality. Because I mean, I've already seen it. A lot of the guys in military Twitter are starting to write right now saying, "Why am I getting the itch to re-enlist when I hear about, Trump taking out some people in Iran?" And I'm like,
dude, I was terrified that was going to happen to me. Terrified.
No, a lot of these guys are like, I'm actually, getting the Jones to, go down to my recruitment center and get back in. I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, you obviously got out for a reason, and there's a purpose to stopping doing it after a while so you can do something else. But yeah,
that's the problem with time, man. It was just like the deployment. I remember hating it so much, and then 3 months, 6 months pass, I forget every stupid thing, and all I can remember was the fun stuff. So now I'm at that point, like, man, a deployment would sound pretty good right now. And then I go back, I actually journaled what it was like, and I read the first 3 pages, and I'm like, fuck that. But if you don't have that kind of like insight to write this stuff down, then yeah, you're going to forget all of it. And all you remember is you were stabbing pirates all day or fighting terrorists all day. And it's like, wow, that sounded awesome. Just like the Hurt Locker. But then you realize, oh, that's just like the Hurt Locker.
Yeah. yeah. I mean, it's a very strange thing where, it's almost like a delayed Stockholm syndrome in a way. You start to love your captor, and in this case, it's a job being.
Or a second wife is another good one.
Correct. I mean, you're basically just sitting there in a constant fight or flight mode, and your adrenal glands are just secreting constantly. And I can imagine how somebody could either really learn to appreciate that feeling because of the alertness and the perception of always being on the ready, but at the same time, I don't think that it's healthy to continue to chase that. But yeah, it's something else. Because I have seen the guys on Twitter already, kind of yearning for that.
Which is ridiculous. Like, first off, aside from the whole thing we just talked about, it's so overblown. Chicken Little, sky is falling. They're like a paper caliphate. Going to war with Iran is not going to be what you think it is. It's going to be like the Iraq War. Even they showed in the movie. What's that other one about the Iraq War where the guys were basically so slow as infantryers that the war was happening always like 20 minutes ahead of them and they got up there too late?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, but the issue here is, optics and inability to really be close to the issue. And that's, it reminds me kind of, 1984, it's, we're at war with Eurasia. We've always been at war with Eurasia.
Oh, yeah. And then it switches over the next year, and we've always been there, too.
Correct. We've always been at war with, the other country that they
my view on it is just what you have to keep in mind is that Canada and Europe have social welfare systems. America has the military. And the military, at its core, it's a giant social... What's the
subsidy?
A social subsidy to keep people working.
Sure.
Well, it also helps the lower income people get up the socioeconomic ladder.
Yeah,
the
but
poor
that's the
guy
same
out
thing
of the
Germany
yeah.
used to do. And like the German military used to be the only way for a person born into poverty to get any kind of social status or income. So you get these generations of military families where it's just like, okay, yeah, granddad was in the military, dad was in the military, sons are in the military, and that was just the whole. So it became their family business, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a bunch of, and I can understand it though, because like if I was in the U.S. military and all that fun hardware, I would kind of be there. Okay, we have a laser gun here and we have a rail gun. Can someone just declare a fucking war so I can try firing this thing?
Sure.
I want to see what happens if I fire a rail gun right into a 12-story building.
Yeah. Does it take the whole thing down, or does it vaporize it? I mean, yeah. I mean that's what a lot of it is.
Not even the fancy tech, just the old tech. When we used to have to sink one of our ships, we create a artificial reef from it. People were chomping at the bit just to get there and shoot a couple rounds at an empty abandoned vessel. You don't even need the rail gun. Just give me a normal missile we leased from Hawaii. Yeah, leased to own armament. That's the Canadian military for you.
Plus, it's also the thing, with the military being so central to the economy, is just that if you have a huge military, you kind of have to use it. Because it's very hard to defend having a military and having a military budget the size of the United States if you're not in any conflict.
Yeah, peacekeeping only takes you so far. That's why we're big on that, because it's something that we can afford to do with our rate, but it still makes us feel useful. Canada's never really been a peacekeeping military, but we did that one stint in Cyprus, and all of a sudden now we're like the UN's task force.
Well, it's that, or we either have to allow some other, quote unquote enemy to nuclear arm so we can enter back into MAD and really get the spigot going again.
Let's just do the Roman thing. Have us build infrastructure in our spare time.
Yeah.
No. My favorite Canadian military man though was the general in Rwanda. He did nothing but apologize.
Oh, Delier. Yeah, his autobiography was a pretty good read too.
I know. It's incredible.
I still think our best though is Rick Hillier, Newfoundlander, common sense guy, chief of defense staff, the first guy who didn't put up with no shit from politicians. It was awesome. I'll have an Iran fucking parade out in the street when he passes.
Yeah. And Carl's right though. I mean, when your options of hiring and subsidizing industry start to decrease, you end up looking for excuses to fire your guns at someone. I mean, if we still had the auto industry, the steel industry, and some of the other heavy industries that we used to have, post World War II while we were rebuilding, I don't think it would be as much of a focus as it is now, at least military spending. But
well, I do think you're going to come back though, because I think a major solution to the climate crisis is more local manufacturing, because you have to realize that if you produce crap in China at a coal-fired plant,
you got to ship it.
And you ship that stuff halfway across the world, and it's not just the shipping, but you also have to keep a military corridor all the way over there to avoid the pirates in the South China Sea that Ryan loves so much.
Wish I could have met them. They seem like a wonderful sort of fellow.
And the carbon footprint of that entire industry becomes much larger than if you just have a bunch of dudes in Detroit make the car or smelt the steel.
Yeah.
I wonder if you actually did break down all the externalities there, if it ends up being more cost effective to use Chinese labor costs for manufacturing.
Yeah, well, I mean...
Well, it's a multinational thing, because multinationals are really the bane to the world. They're the biggest problem.
Oh, yeah.
Because what they're doing is they're just looking at the economy, and they move to the place where they have the least externalities. Like, the reason why Chinese labor is so cheap, they don't give a shit if they kill a couple 100,000. That helps them solve a problem. It's actually great for them when Apple's sweatshop has people killing themselves off the fucking roof.
Oh, I know. And what did they do? They bought a net. There you go.
Yeah, it's no talk about, okay, maybe we should give these people some health care. Maybe we should give them masks when they're working with arsenic.
They're just going to make it harder to kill yourself in the factory.
Yeah, well, they just moved. Well, the Chinese have no labor laws like most modern Western states have. They have almost no environmental laws. They have virtually no security laws for factories. So of course it's cheaper to produce there.
They have no.
The only way
they have no intellectual property laws, and they also have no food safety laws. So if you put all that together, I mean, technically they would be the most
1890s in the States is what it sounds like.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, we're going to add gypsum to the flour just to stretch it out.
Yeah, it's going to be, well, China's the only, I mean, they're one step away from rolling slaves onto the market.
But that's the thing, too. I don't think it's going to change in the way you were suggesting, Carl, because I remember seeing this during the Canadian debates when everybody was puffing their chest over climate change and what we're going to do. And Maxime Bernier, our little independent guy, he made the case that, like, right now, Canada is 1%. So our best thing we can do to climate change is broker a trade deal with stipulations with China and India. And everybody there basically called him a Nazi for that, even though his was the most effective solution. So I don't think the climate change is going to take effect to the point where we're actually effective. I think it's all just signaling and posturing. It's a Louis Vuitton purse on a national scale.
Yeah, plus, you have to keep in mind, I grew up with Captain Planet.
Oh, yeah, he was awesome.
They've been screaming about climate change, and then it was, I think it was going to be an ice age.
Oh, yeah, global cooling in the 70s.
So it's always going to be, they always need that one hot button issue to distract people from the fact that they're robbing you blind and banging your wife. It's like multinational owners and operators, they're basically Kevin from sales.
Oh, they are. Not only are they Kevin from sales, but they're also Tyrone from shipping, because they get you coming and going. The major issue that I find with the global economy and this whole issue of who is going to be the steward of the world with regard to climate issues is that your two biggest offenders, one shits in the river that they drink from and wash their cows in, and the other has no problems throwing men off the tops of buildings because there's a net below so they can bring them right back into the factory to make more lithium-ion batteries.
Yeah, and dock them 2 days' pay for having to
repair the net,
taking an unauthorized break to kill themselves.
Yes. And that's the issue, is that, we're not playing by the same rules as everybody else, and we don't have the numbers as everybody else. Everybody blames the US. Oh, you're so consumptive, you're 300 million people and you have all this extra space. Why don't you help out? Well, why doesn't the country with 2 billion people stop procreating and treating their own people like slaves? And why doesn't the country with 1.5 billion people learn the sanitary sewer system? Just basic shit.
Oh, dude, India has this thing now, those anonymous masks. They kind of took it, and it's a NGO that they have there that's literally trying to solve the problem of people shitting in the streets. It was the most fascinating TED Talk I've ever seen, and it kind of was horrifying at the same time that this is such a big problem that people have created like a superhero to solve it.
Oh,
Captain Shithole. I don't mean to make fun of it either, because it's like a noble goal, but sometimes you just got to shake your head.
But I mean, when your main source of religion, food, water, washing, carrying away human feces, and tourism is one river, you got fucking problems. I mean, the Ganges is basically literally the toilet of the country. And, any place that still has diphtheria and other ancient diseases that occur because of close contact with shit, how are you going to tell them to change their carbon footprint when they can't even wipe their ass properly?
Nope.
I think the biggest issue comes, though, is I think all of this is created by politicians, more or less, on every level. Because you get an overpopulation in developing countries because you subsidize people with benefits from other countries. So developmental funds, you have bleeding heart NGOs. And, if I ever have a son and he's like, I'm going to go work for an NGO, I'm going to slap the shit out of him. That's a different perspective. But
well, how else is he going to solve that problem of guilt for his affluence?
But my main issue with that is just politicians break things because they fuck up natural, let's call it limitations. Because in an ideal world, if you shit in a river and then drink the water and you get diphtheria, you should die. That's nature's way of saying, okay, you're just too dumb to be alive. But then you have, some bleeding heart liberals from the West who's down there on a save the poor uncultured brown people mission, who feeds them antibiotics and feeds them medicine. Same thing. I mean, when they had the Ebola outbreak in the Congo,
right?
And they broke into an Ebola clinic and dragged the patients out.
Jesus.
For me, that's an easy solution. Okay, stop treating them. You fly all your personnel out. You create a military cordon around there, and you say, if any plane takes off from this country, we're shooting it down.
Right.
Same thing with Sweden. If you want to see, what happens when a bunch of idiotic liberals get to run the government after the bleeding heart policy for 20 years, okay, fine. We'll build a wall around Sweden, and we'll treat them as sort of a lab to see what happens when you let liberals run the government for 30 years.
And then we can run a double blind with California and do the same exact thing.
That's Brazil 2.0 electric boogaloo.
Yeah, the electric boogaloo, exactly. No, what the biggest issue here, I think, is that governments and corporations don't make money if people are allowed to fail on their own. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, because somebody will always try and buy their vote so that they can get what they want out of it. So there's an incentive to placate people.
Plus, you can't tax the dead.
Also true.
So the more people you have working and consuming, regardless of how stupid they may be, it's easier to keep them upright and droning along than it is to let them fail on their own. Whether it's other countries that can, send us lithium-ion batteries, or it's someplace in the middle of nowhere, where we get ridiculous issues and ideas like chakras and 17,000 gods.
Jesus, you can even start on that one. Granted, I like it too from a local level. A really healthy social safety net really does encourage me not to worry too much about always picking the safe choice. If I know the dumbass beside me is living a decent life, I'm like, no matter what happens, I'm smart enough to know that that's the worst case scenario and I can live with that. But you're right, then it gets past that point to absurdity. The point where a guy can shit in a river, drink out of the river, and then somebody's on the other side with a syringe going, here's my anti-shit in the river hygiene syringe. Thanks, man.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to the what Chess was saying about it's government needs to let people fail on their own. But I like the idea of a social safety net, and I actually do like universal health care.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason why I'm a big fan of it, well, it's twofold. Number one, if you have public schooling and you have public health care up to a given level like the US does, then once someone, let's say, finishes college and they're ready to start working and suddenly the person gets cancer, it's much cheaper to fix that person on the public's dime so you can tax him for another 40 years as opposed to letting them die because they can't afford treatments.
Which makes sense.
So
I agree with that too.
It's not a bleeding heart thing. It's just the fact that if my tax dollars have gone towards your education for 20 years, no fucking way are you getting out of financing my retirement by dying early. No, fuck you.
You're saying you want the government to build a net.
Yeah, we're going to keep you healthy and working so I can fund me banging hookers and doing coke in Thailand for 20 years.
Here's your net. You're going to be fined for taking a break, try and die of cancer.
Fuck you, trying to get out easy with cancer.
But that's the thing too with the investment. And I know we're talking about this a lot, like Jonty says here, kind of Chicken Little, moral panics. They're not really. Like, enjoy the decline. I don't know how you guys use it, but I always use it at a bit of a tongue-in-cheek fact because it's basically a golden age. You don't have to worry about anything because all the pollution is outsourced to China and India. You don't have to worry about losing too much money because there's enough social programs out there that you're not going to die on the street or diphtheria. You could literally take a dump in a river and people will help you by taking the dump out before you drink it. So, like, how could you not enjoy yourself in this climate? And people are worried, like, oh, my wife won't cook 3 meals a day for me and stay at home. Like, dude, like, is that really what you want to go back to? 1890s America? Like, I don't. Where you have 6 kids and 2 of them die before they're 4? No, man.
Yeah, I do wish they'd bring back dueling. I think that would help a lot with the... I'd really like to see some fucking kid who's like, okay, boomer, and you slap him across the face with your glove and it's like, okay, pistols at dawn.
Well, doesn't some places in the States still have... I can't remember what the law is called, but essentially if somebody's starting a fight with you and you want to fight, then legally neither of you are culpable for it. I kind of remember that being a thing in Washington State.
It might be, but what kind of slap fight nonsense would that be in Washington State?
Oh, dude, slap fights can be deadly if you do them right.
Well, no. I'm not talking Russian slap fighting where they stand across the table from each other and wind up.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about flailing away with, limp wrists with a head turned to the side and 2 guys just kind of slapping at each other. But when it comes down to, dealing with all of these issues, you can either have a volunteer system or you can have a government system, but there's always going to be somebody out there who's going to take care of those who are at their worst. I mean, yeah. I've never seen where, a decent society in any way, shape, or form just simply abandons people because, that they're of a certain type. And that's part of the rhetoric that's always out there is that, conservatives hate people, especially old people and young people. And progressives love everybody. And because of that, you should vote progressive because we just simply care more. Well,
Doesn't that sound like Pinnacle of Man with his I love you at the end of his speech from his shed?
Very much so, because it's disingenuous. I mean, if you look at rich progressives, they don't like a lot of people, or they wouldn't create barriers to housing and things like that in places that they live. I mean, you want to talk about shit in the streets? San Francisco is a perfect example.
Oh man, I was so annoyed with that. I first went there in 2006. Awesome party town, sailors loved. I went there 2 years back, and the whole place smelled like piss.
Well, not only that, but I mean,
Well, the thing is, it's the same thing with a house. You kind of need a caring mom, and you need kind of the strict dad. Because if it's all strict dad, then your kids are going to turn out crazy. If it's all lenient single mom, your kids are going to turn out crazy.
yes.
Do you want
So you
Elliot
kinda
Rodger
need-
or a stripper as your argument then?
Well, you need that balance between discipline and care and nurturing.
Yeah.
Because if you have a nurturing, let's say, mom and a strict dad, you'll get the equal measures discipline and empathy. If you get all empathy and no discipline, then all of a sudden you're a trans something in the middle of San Francisco shitting in the street with purple hair. And the other way around, you're some guy in the military who opens fire on a random crowd of protesters because, well, they were breaking the law, man.
Yeah, they were jaywalking.
They were jaywalking. You had to be shot. So it's kind of the choice between an absolute, let's call it what would I call it? A feels fest versus a fascist state. And you need somewhere in between because we need rules, but we also need freedom and care.
Yeah. I mean, you can't have constant Woodstock or constant Kent State. Neither one of those are workable solutions.
Well, at least at Penn State, people were getting laid. At least the track team.
No, I'm talking about Kent State with a K.
I think the
where
Penn State.
where about the same time as the original Woodstock, they were having
Armed National Guards.
the National Guard came in and shot a whole bunch of students. So, but yeah.
But yeah, and that's even with this, that's the other problem I have. So we know about all these things now because media is so pervasive and they're so desperate for clicks. Anything that happens automatically gets amped up to 10 and like I shouldn't know that somebody shot 5 people in New Zealand at all. But the problem is now we're getting people who watch this. They see it 15 minutes after it happened with a live stream and they just assume that, every school in buttfuck Saskatoon is going to have a school shooter in it because you saw 7 examples of it last month in a world of 7 billion people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, school shootings are kind of a uniquely American phenomenon, though.
Well, that's the thing.
Well,
And even though there's 50 states, each state has 24 cities, the odds of being in a school shooting in the States are astronomically low. But because every single one is being televised, Americans think that their school in Idaho is going to end up having a school shooter at some point when it's in reality, it's just not. Now, I'm not saying don't prepare for it, but adding metal detectors and armed guards at school and arresting kids for swinging their pencil too loud is not really the answer either. That's just panic knee jerk.
Well, to be honest with you, though, I mean, there's one way to be real sure. I mean, odds are your school is not going to have 2 school shooters.
Just go to Columbine and you're good.
No, yeah, well, no, but the thing is, your odds of surviving a school shooting goes up exponentially if you're the shooter.
You fucking guy.
Yeah, you might not survive long after the shooting.
Ooh, here's the thing too. Speaking of panic, did you guys ever see that chart that's going around recently of the fires in the Amazon? Like the amount of damage they're causing or the amount of CO2 they're releasing, and then the ones in Australia?
Yeah.
Do you remember how Brazil, like the Amazon rainforest was literally the third coming of the apocalypse? And then you look at the chart compared to Australia, it's like dwarfed by it, like maybe a sixth of the damage. If you have everything as a 10 out of 10 disaster, what happens when an 11 out of 10 disaster comes? And I think it's numbing people to it because now it's like, oh, it's another world-ending brush fire. Oh, well.
Well, people have been crying wolf for ages, and that's kind of a big part of the problem is that people keep crying wolf. And it's Bill Maher had a good bit on that at one point where he's like, okay, I realized when they wanted to elect Bush, we called him a Nazi. When they tried to elect a Nazi would establish a fascist state. When they wanted to elect Romney, we said he was a fascist who wanted to erect a fascist state. Now that we actually have a problem with one of the real candidates that may do something like that, now nobody cares anymore because we've been saying it for 20 years.
Yeah. Except for the fact that he still hasn't. So Mars kind of just exactly what he's critiquing.
Yeah.
The only guy who didn't take his first term to go to war, and everybody's like, oh, this guy's going to be Hitler. Like, dude, he's the first guy who didn't bring soldiers into the Middle East.
Yeah, I do think it's kind of funny, though. I mean, looking at Obama's Nobel Prize and his use of drones.
Oh, his participation trophy? Yeah. Dude, if that's not like the perfect analogy to what's wrong with modern society, the participation Nobel Peace Prize. Hey, you're not Bush. Here's an award.
That's
Thanks,
right.
Tips.
You're a person of color and became president. Here's your reward.
Was that remote control in your hand? Oh, don't worry about that. I'm just going to click this button and don't worry about it.
It takes care of some problems someplace, somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody mad about drone war, but nobody was mad because the Pentagon had to do that because people were too fat to join the military. Like, everything's got this cause and effect, and nobody seems to picture anything more than outside of their arm's reach. It's like it doesn't exist.
Well, that's the same with people believing that history started at the time of their birth.
Yeah, it's annoying. Although it's from retro perspective, that's the funny part too. Like, you guys have both done it too, where somebody brings a problem to them. This is my wife, this is my relationship, whatever. And you can essentially lay out, like, here's how your next 6 months to 12 months are going to go. This is going to happen. You're going to do this. She's going to do this. And then this is what's going to happen. And they come back at you like you're the most amazing fortune teller. It's like, nah, dude, just pay attention to the last 20 divorces you've seen. And they all follow the exact same script.
Yeah. People aren't that special.
No. The 6 different archetypes of married red pill guys. And then once you learn all 6, you become the Jack 10 of Hearts only effective.
Well, or less prescriptive. I won't crap on him too much. Just he just tried to tailor everything to the person so much that it lost its effectiveness in the minutia.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's always the problem with moving away from heuristics to prescriptions.
Well, it's dangerous. That's why I hate coaching and I like consulting, because guys who act like coaches, I find, are always prescriptive. And if they're wrong, it's because you didn't do it hard enough. At least consultants, they set expectations very clear at the beginning. It's like a house inspector. Look, if there's actually mold, it's not my problem. I'm here to like test as best I can, but
right.
So at least you know, okay, he didn't find obvious traces of this stuff, but at least I still have to do some due diligence and have a head on my shoulders. If my kids get sick every day, every time they go to the bathroom, then maybe check behind the wall.
Yeah, I mean, there might be something in the ventilation system that shouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm. But then that's a trust thing. That's like investing. When you guys we were talking before about getting your mutual funds, managed accounts, and that, it involves you trusting the institution. And I'm having a hard time trusting much of anything. Like, I don't trust my bank with my investments because they've already clearly shown me examples in my life how they're just in it for their percentages. They don't care if I make money. They don't care if I lose money.
That's
so, like, why would I give them money?
That's why I like money managers who invest a large part of their own money into the fund that they manage.
Yeah, skin in the game. I can go with that. But that's the whole thing. And all these things. Government, do you want to invest in it? Well, I don't really trust. So then invest in you. And that's my investing strategy, is to invest in me and things that I can do to make more money, because I've always paid a great ROI. I'm the only guy who wipes my ass every day. So the very least I could do is invest in them.
Oh, I agree with you. But you also have to look at the smart way. Like, I had a guy ask me if he should get his MBA and pay for it out of pocket. No, you get a job and you get your company to pay for it.
Oh, God, yeah. Isn't that the whole point of an MBA, though? It's kind of like a filtering mechanism. If a company gives enough of a shit about you to invest in you, then you must clearly be worthwhile.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And I think that was the whole argument as to why university is becoming so prohibitively expensive right now. Because once you made it free and cheap for everybody, you lost that ability to signal competence. And so they keep rising the prices.
Yeah, but it's also the problem with college in general, is that when they get money based on how many students they have, that incentivizes them to mass produce college grads instead of focusing on quality.
Uh-huh.
And then you get gender studies programs, then you have social science programs that only qualify you to fuck up my cappuccino.
Which makes sense, because if you took them in a physics degree and they fail out the first year, that's 3 years of revenue you're missing. So of course you're going to lower the qualifications of a degree so the guy can stay there.
Well, it's actually a good thing, though. I mean, if people fail out, then you eliminate. It's better to fail fast than to fail slow. And one of the dumbest financial decisions you can make is to go a couple of $100,000 in debt to get a degree, to get a 40K a year job when you can get, 50, 60, 70K as a welder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of the professional schools model. They try to crush you your first year. So either you're gonna sink or swim quickly, so nobody wastes their time.
Dude, that's every special force qualification in the military too. Just
Yeah.
clearance divers. My buddy did clearance diving course when I was doing my leadership course. We're up at 4:30 in the morning. Meanwhile, these guys have already been diving for 3 hours and their face looks like ground beef. And they're looking for food that's the quickest to digest so they can get back out there. I have a few friends that are clearance divers. That's about as close as we get to a Navy SEAL, by the way. No, not nearly as cool, but the problem is once they actually get into the field and are doing their job, it's never nearly as hard as that qualification. But they do filter out people who really want to be there and people who aren't going to be a waste of time.
Yeah, professional universities in the U.S. can be so grueling that they write whiny books about it. There's one called 1L about the law school first year experience, and then there's a number of others about being a medical student your first year. And it's all true. I mean, you either are capable of doing the work and putting it in and doing well on your first year tests, or you're not. And hopefully you either attrition out and you find something else that you're more suited to do, or if you struggle through and you don't pass the bar, then you just put a JD at the end of your name and say you went to law school and you don't practice law. But anyway, it's 11:15, and I think at least one person's got to prep for another show in 15 minutes. And
yeah, thanks guys. It's been fun. I hope for the audience too, you guys learned a little bit about financially saving for your future in amidst all of our ramblings here anyway.
And to be fair, Ryan doesn't sound that sick.
I look like I got hit in the face with a shovel, man.
You always do.
You son of a bitch.
And it looks like you bled on your shirt every show too, so there's that.
It's just a red shirt. Dude, what do you... See, you used to be so much better at making fun of me. The stuff really hit home. Now you're just grasping.
Yeah, well, I had to come up with something just before we go off. I mean, it wouldn't be a good red morning unless I took at least 1 or 2 shots on you.
Fair point. Well, at least only 30% of this panel almost died, so.
Would be cool if the entire panel almost... Well, you had your car accident with that bike.
Yeah, but it never killed me. It was just I just forgot 4 hours of my life and got to get out of 6 weeks of work.
Yeah. Now you
Yeah,
got
Jesse lives in the Midwest, so he's kind of dying constantly.
I'm dying of lack of culture. That's it, Carl.
Whatever. Cheese on everything. That's totally culture.
That's right.
All right. Anyways, guys, so take care. Don't forget, I think it's John's channel for Rule 0 today, was it? Or
Yeah, he just dropped the link.
all right, perfect. Anyways, guys, have fun.
You too. Take it easy.